The city was busy that morning, with people rushing to their jobs, some holding coffee cups, others checking their phones as they walked. Cars honked in the distance, and the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery mixed with the scent of wet asphalt from last night's rain. Among the crowd, a young black girl moved carefully, gripping her cane tightly as she made her way down the sidewalk. She had always been cautious in crowded places, but she faced the world every day with courage. Her wheelchair was left at home today because she wanted to challenge herself to walk, even though every step was a little harder than the last. She loved the city, even if it could be harsh at times. Street musicians played soft jazz near the corner, and a small group of children chased each other around a fountain, their laughter mixing with the hum of traffic. The girl smiled faintly, feeling a little warmth from the little joys of life. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder and continued walking, aware of her surroundings, as she had learned to do since she was little. The city was full of surprises, some good and some not so good. At the same time, a woman named Karen strode down the same street, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete. Karen had a reputation for being aggressive and self-centered. She wore designer clothes, large sunglasses, and carried herself as if the world should step aside for her. Today, she seemed impatient, frowning at her phone as she read something that clearly upset her. She wasn't paying attention to the people around her. The world, in her mind, was either an obstacle or an audience to her frustrations. As the girl continued walking, she noticed Karen approaching from the opposite side. Karen, in a rush and frustrated by whatever was on her phone, brushed past the girl without a word. But then, as if something inside her snapped, she turned and stared at the girl. Her eyes narrowed, and a sneer crossed her face. The words she would later shout were born from a moment of pure cruelty. "You die, filthy creature," Karen yelled, pointing aggressively at the girl. The words were like a punch to the stomach, harsh and unprovoked. The girl froze for a moment, her heart racing. She had heard insults before, but never so loud, never so public, and never so cruel. Around them, people paused mid-step, unsure how to react. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others reached for their phones, hoping to capture the moment before it escalated. The city seemed to hold its breath. The girl's lips trembled as she tried to respond, but no words came. She was used to standing up for herself, but the shock made her momentarily silent. Karen took a step closer, her voice rising in volume. "You think you belong here? You don't," she shouted. People started to gather around. A man in a suit whispered to his colleague, "Should we do something?" Another woman held her child closer, not wanting the child to hear the hateful words. Some young adults began recording the scene, sensing that this confrontation was about to get worse. The girl's hands shook as she gripped her cane tighter, trying to find her balance not just physically, but emotionally as well. Despite the fear and humiliation, the girl refused to back down. She straightened her posture, lifting her chin slightly, showing as much strength as she could. She knew that reacting angrily could escalate the situation, but doing nothing also felt wrong. Inside, a storm of emotions swirled. Fear, anger, embarrassment, but also determination. She wanted to show that she would not be crushed by someone else's hatred. Karen, however, seemed determined to break her spirit. Her face twisted with rage, and she stepped even closer. The crowd began to murmur, some shouting for her to stop, others urging the girl to defend herself. A passerby, a young man in a hoodie, stepped in front of Karen, raising his hands. "Hey, that's enough. Calm down," he shouted. Karen glared at him, but the interruption didn't stop her. She was fueled by her own anger and perhaps by the thrill of asserting dominance in a public space. The girl took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Memories of previous encounters where people had underestimated her rushed through her mind. She had faced difficulties before. People doubting her because of her disability, dismissing her because of her race. But each time she had found the strength to move forward. Today would be no different. She refused to let Karen's words define her. Suddenly, Karen reached out and pushed the girl. The shove wasn't strong enough to knock her down completely, but it was enough to make her stumble and lose her balance for a moment. Gasps came from the crowd. The man in the hoodie stepped forward quickly, catching the girl just in time so she didn't fall. Others in the crowd began murmuring and pointing, some filming, some yelling, some simply watching in shock. The city street, which moments ago had been a normal busy morning, was now a scene of tension and outrage. Karen stepped back, looking around at the growing crowd. Her face was a mix of defiance and panic, realizing perhaps that she had crossed a line in public. People's expressions ranged from anger to disgust. Some whispered to each other, calling for authorities, while others immediately posted the videos to social media, knowing how fast something like this could spread. The girl straightened herself fully, breathing heavily but determined not to cry. She looked at Karen, who was now trying to regain composure, pretending the incident didn't happen. The courage she displayed in that moment inspired some in the crowd. She didn't speak loudly or shout. She simply stood there, holding her cane, looking at Karen with a quiet strength that seemed to say, "You will not win." Within minutes, people started approaching the girl, offering words of support and concern. One woman offered her water. A young man asked if she was okay. The girl nodded, grateful for the kindness of strangers. Meanwhile, Karen's earlier aggression began to backfire. Videos of her outburst were already circulating online, with captions condemning her behavior. The crowd, once passive, now began to actively support the girl, their murmurs of outrage growing louder. As the situation continued, the city itself seemed to react. People nearby stopped to watch, and some called the police, reporting an assault. Others used their phones to record and share, making sure the story would reach a wider audience. The girl realized that even though the incident was frightening and humiliating, it had awakened a sense of solidarity among strangers. The city, in its own way, was standing with her. By the time the police arrived, Karen was trying to leave, but the crowd blocked her path, urging her to stay until authorities could take statements. The girl, despite her trembling hands and quickened heartbeat, gave her account clearly, explaining what had happened. The witnesses who had recorded the incident also provided statements, ensuring that there was clear evidence of Karen's aggression. The scene was tense, but there was also a sense of justice beginning to take shape. After giving her statement, the girl was escorted to a safer spot by the police. She could still hear the crowd murmuring, some offering encouragement, some criticizing Karen, and some simply talking about what they had just witnessed. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She had survived the encounter with dignity, and even though the memory of Karen's cruel words would linger, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had stood strong in the face of hatred, and the city, in a small but powerful way, had recognized that strength. By the end of the morning, the story of the incident began spreading through social media. Videos and posts shared the girl's bravery and Karen's outrageous behavior. Messages of support poured in from people across the city, from people she didn't even know. The girl felt a mix of emotions: relief, pride, and still a lingering sadness for the cruelty she had faced. But above all, she felt hope. Hope that the city could rally behind those who are unfairly treated. Hope that people could stand up against hatred. And hope that her story could inspire others to find courage in the face of adversity. It was just one morning, one encounter, but it was enough to start a movement. A young disabled black girl, standing tall with her cane in a busy city street, had shown that bravery isn't about size or strength. It's about the heart, the mind, and the willingness to face injustice, no matter how frightening. And for Karen, that moment would be the start of her reckoning. As the city's eyes were now on her, watching, judging, and waiting to see justice done. The moments after the push were chaotic. The crowd that had gathered on the busy city street began whispering, murmuring, and some even shouting at Karen, who was now backing away, her confidence slipping with each passing second. The young girl steadied herself on her cane, taking deep, controlled breaths, trying to shake off the rush of fear and adrenaline that still coursed through her body. She could feel her heart beating loudly in her chest, but she refused to let it show. She straightened her back and looked around, noticing the expressions of concern, anger, and disbelief on the faces of the people around her. A man in a gray jacket stepped forward, holding his phone, and said, "I caught the whole thing. Do you want me to share it with the police?" The girl nodded quietly, grateful for the support. She had always been careful, knowing that incidents like this could escalate, and now there was proof. She realized that her ordeal might not just be about one moment on the street but could become a story of awareness, teaching others about the dangers of prejudice and aggression. Karen, sensing the shift in power, straightened her shoulders and tried to regain control. "It was nothing," she said sharply, her voice trembling slightly. "You're overreacting." But her words sounded hollow, and the crowd didn't respond as she had hoped. People were taking out their phones, recording every move, and some even shouted at her, demanding respect and decency. Her sense of authority was crumbling before the eyes of strangers, and for the first time in a long time, she felt exposed and vulnerable. The girl's breathing gradually slowed as she focused on the calm determination that had always helped her face challenges. She could hear snippets of conversation around her. "Did you see that? She pushed her. That poor girl didn't deserve that. Someone should call the police before it gets worse." These voices encouraged her, reminding her that she was not alone, that the city itself seemed to be standing with her in spirit, even if only a few individuals were taking action. Soon, someone in the crowd called the police. A calm voice on the phone reassured the caller that help was on the way. The girl watched as Karen's face turned pale, realizing that her actions would have consequences. Her previous confidence, the arrogance that allowed her to act cruelly in public, was fading. The girl's courage, on the other hand, felt stronger than ever. She had faced cruelty head-on, and now the support of the community gave her a quiet strength that made her stand even taller, despite the lingering tremor in her legs. Minutes felt like hours as the situation developed. A few people stepped closer to the girl, offering water and encouraging words. One woman knelt beside her, saying, "You're so brave. Don't let her words hurt you. We're all here for you." The girl smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that contrasted sharply with the harshness of the encounter. Even in the midst of chaos, there were people who cared, who recognized that no one should be treated like that, no matter their race, disability, or background. Karen tried to leave, pushing her way through the crowd, but a young man in a hoodie stepped in front of her. "You need to stay right here until the police arrive," he said firmly. She looked around, frustrated and embarrassed. The crowd was no longer passive. They were witnesses and participants in a small movement of justice forming right there on the street. Karen realized that this was no longer just a private act of aggression. It was now a public spectacle, and she was losing. The girl adjusted her grip on her cane, taking another deep breath. She thought about the previous challenges she had faced, moments when people doubted her because of her disability, laughed at her struggles, or ignored her presence. Each time she had found a way to rise above. Today was no different. She had been strong before, and she would be strong now. This wasn't just about surviving a moment of cruelty. It was about standing up, claiming her space in the world, and refusing to let hatred define her. A few teenagers in the crowd were whispering to each other, clearly moved by the girl's resilience. "She didn't even yell back at her," one said. "She just stayed strong. That's amazing." Their admiration reflected a wider sense of support that was growing. People were beginning to understand that the girl's strength wasn't just physical. It was emotional, mental, and incredibly inspiring. Karen's attempt to dominate had failed, and the energy of the crowd shifted toward empathy and protection for the girl. Soon, the police arrived, their presence calming the tension on the street. Officers quickly assessed the situation, asking the girl if she was okay and if she wanted to press charges. She nodded, explaining calmly what had happened. Her voice was steady, even as her hands still shook slightly from the adrenaline. The officers asked witnesses for their statements and reviewed the recordings that had been made. It became clear that Karen's actions were deliberate and unjustified, and the evidence was overwhelming. Karen tried to argue to minimize what she had done, but the officers didn't seem convinced. The girl stood quietly, knowing that the truth was on her side. The crowd watched as Karen was instructed to wait while the situation was documented. The sense of justice, even in its early stages, was palpable. The girl realized that courage and truth were more powerful than anger and cruelty, especially when backed by witnesses and a community that cared. As the police continued their work, the girl began to process what had just happened. Her mind replayed Karen's harsh words, the push, and the crowd's reaction. She felt a mix of emotions: fear, relief, anger, and gratitude. She had faced a dangerous and humiliating situation, but she had emerged with her dignity intact. She thought about the people who had stood up for her, the ones who had called the police, and the strangers who had offered words of comfort. Their support reminded her that even in a city as vast and busy as this one, human kindness could shine through in moments of darkness. By mid-morning, the street was beginning to return to normal. The crowd slowly dispersed, though some stayed to speak with the girl, offering continued support. Social media posts about the incident had already started circulating, with videos showing the moment Karen pushed the girl. Comments poured in from people expressing outrage at Karen's behavior and admiration for the girl's bravery. The story was spreading quickly, and the girl realized that her ordeal might have a bigger impact than she had imagined. As the girl continued on her way, accompanied by the reassurance of a few kind strangers, she felt a quiet pride. She had faced cruelty in a public space and had not been broken by it. She had found strength in the chaos, courage in the crowd, and hope in the support of others. The experience, while frightening, also became a lesson in resilience, showing her and everyone who witnessed it that standing up for oneself, even in the face of hate, could inspire and mobilize a community. That morning, the city witnessed more than just an act of aggression. It witnessed courage, unity, and the beginning of a story that would not be forgotten. The girl's bravery, combined with the swift response of the people around her, sent a message that hatred could be challenged, that injustice could be confronted, and that even one person, standing firm, could inspire many. As she moved through the city streets, her head held high, she knew that this was only the start of a journey, one that would continue to shape her life and influence those who saw her stand strong in the face of adversity. By the next day, the city was buzzing with news of the incident. Social media had exploded overnight, sharing videos of Karen's push and the girl's calm, courageous response. Thousands of people had watched the clips, leaving comments of support for the girl and condemnation for Karen. Many called for action, demanding that she face consequences for her actions. Even local news outlets picked up the story, reporting it as an example of public harassment and discrimination. The city had taken notice, and the girl's bravery was inspiring people in ways she hadn't imagined. The girl woke up feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. She knew today might bring attention, and perhaps even interviews or statements, but she felt ready. Her family supported her, reminding her that what happened was not her fault and that her courage mattered. They helped her prepare for the day, encouraging her to stay confident and focused. Even though she had experienced fear and humiliation, she was ready to face the world again, strengthened by the support she had received. Walking through the city streets that morning felt different. People recognized her from the videos, some nodding in respect, others smiling and offering words of encouragement. A few stopped to take selfies with her or ask how she was feeling. The girl felt proud but also humbled by the kindness of strangers. Her heart swelled with gratitude as she realized that what seemed like a private, painful moment had become a symbol of courage for many. Karen, meanwhile, was struggling with the fallout. The public backlash had been swift and intense. Her social media accounts were flooded with messages criticizing her behavior. Friends and colleagues were distancing themselves, and some even spoke out against her actions publicly. She tried to issue a statement downplaying the incident, claiming it was an accident, but the videos told a different story. People could see clearly that she had deliberately pushed the girl, and her attempts at damage control were failing. Meanwhile, the girl received messages of support from people all over the city. Some were strangers who had seen the videos, others were advocacy groups for people with disabilities and racial equality. They praised her bravery and resilience, calling her a role model for standing strong in a public space. The girl felt both overwhelmed and motivated by the attention. She realized that her experience, though difficult, could now be a force for positive change. The police had been following up on the case since the previous day. Officers visited the girl to ensure her safety and gather more details. They asked about her experience, her feelings, and if she needed any additional support. The girl answered honestly, explaining how terrifying it had been, but also how empowering it felt to have the community stand with her. The officers reassured her that they were taking the case seriously and that Karen would face appropriate consequences. This reassurance brought a sense of relief, though the girl knew the journey was just beginning. As the day continued, more people came forward to share their own experiences with harassment, bullying, or discrimination. Many cited the girl's story as inspiration to speak out. Community leaders and activists began organizing meetings and discussions about creating safer spaces for everyone, especially for people with disabilities and marginalized communities. The incident had sparked a citywide conversation about respect, empathy, and accountability, and the girl's courage was at the center of it. Karen tried to maintain her normal routine but found it increasingly difficult. Everywhere she went, people were aware of what had happened. Gossip, social media posts, and news coverage made it impossible to hide. At work, colleagues avoided her, and some openly criticized her actions. The realization that her public image was crumbling added to her frustration and fear. Karen began to understand that one moment of cruelty, captured and shared, could not be undone. She was facing the consequences of her behavior, both legally and socially. The girl, despite all the attention, tried to maintain her normal routine. She attended school, continued her activities, and spent time with friends and family. But everywhere she went, there was a subtle shift in how people treated her. Some were more attentive, others more respectful. The girl noticed that her courage had not only changed how others saw her, but had also affected her own sense of self. She felt stronger, more confident, and more capable of facing challenges. The incident had been a test of her resilience, and she had passed with grace. Local organizations reached out to the girl, offering opportunities to speak at events, participate in campaigns, and share her story. They wanted to highlight the importance of standing up against harassment and promoting inclusivity. The girl considered these opportunities carefully, understanding the responsibility that came with being a public figure, even if reluctantly. She wanted to help others while staying true to herself and not letting the attention overwhelm her. Throughout the day, Karen's situation worsened. The police had enough evidence to charge her with assault and public harassment. The videos, eyewitness statements, and social media posts created a strong case against her. Friends and acquaintances who had once supported her began to withdraw, and her reputation was rapidly deteriorating. Karen realized that this incident was changing her life permanently, and there was no easy way to reverse the damage. The city had responded with swift justice, showing that cruelty and aggression were not acceptable. The girl's family was proud of her resilience. They had seen her struggle through difficult situations before, but never in such a public, intense way. Her parents praised her bravery, reminding her that standing up for herself had inspired thousands. They encouraged her to continue being a voice for others who might not have the strength or platform to speak out. The girl felt a sense of purpose she hadn't expected, realizing that her experience could help others feel empowered. By evening, the city's energy had shifted. The incident had sparked conversations in homes, workplaces, schools, and online communities. People were discussing empathy, inclusivity, and the importance of supporting one another in public spaces. The girl had become a symbol of courage and resilience, and her story was helping to create a more aware and compassionate community. The impact of one moment, captured and shared, was growing beyond the street where it had happened. Karen, now isolated and facing legal action, was forced to confront her behavior. She reflected on her actions and the consequences, realizing that public aggression and prejudice could not be hidden or ignored. The city's reaction had made it clear that cruelty was not tolerated, and she would have to answer for her actions. This confrontation with reality was uncomfortable but necessary, highlighting the accountability that comes with living in a community. For the girl, The next day brought a sense of calm after the intensity of public attention. She continued her routine, but with a newfound awareness of her own strength and the power of standing up for what is right. She thought about the people who had supported her, the witnesses who had spoken up, and the community that had rallied around her. Their support had been a lifeline, reinforcing the idea that courage and kindness could triumph over hate. The city, now buzzing with discussions about the incident, began to consider measures to prevent similar events in the future. Schools and organizations reviewed their policies on harassment, public behavior, and inclusivity. Community programs were planned to promote awareness and empathy. The girl's experience had not only highlighted the problem but also sparked efforts to make the city safer and more respectful for everyone. As the night settled over the city, the girl reflected on everything that had happened. The fear, the humiliation, the bravery, and the support she had received all mingled in her thoughts. She realized that her life had changed, not because she had sought attention, but because she had faced cruelty with courage. The story of that day would remain with her and the city, serving as a reminder that standing up for oneself and for what is right could inspire change and bring a community together. The girl went to bed that night with a quiet sense of pride. She had survived a terrifying moment, inspired countless people, and helped start a conversation that could make her city a better place. The courage she had shown was hers alone, but its impact was far-reaching. In facing Karen's aggression, she had discovered a strength she had always had, and in doing so, had given hope to others who might face similar challenges. The story of her bravery was only beginning, and the city would continue to watch, learn, and grow from it. The day after the incident, the girl woke up to find that the story had taken on a life of its own. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages of support from friends, strangers, and even local community leaders. Videos of Karen pushing her had been shared thousands of times, and hashtags praising the girl's bravery were trending across social media. It was overwhelming, but the girl felt a sense of purpose. She realized that her experience could now help educate people about the importance of respect and empathy in public spaces. Her family encouraged her to stay grounded despite the sudden attention. They reminded her that while the story was inspiring others, it was okay to take care of herself and to set boundaries. They helped her get ready for the day, preparing her for interviews, school, and interactions that might be challenging. The girl felt nervous but determined. She knew that she had to represent herself honestly and calmly, no matter how many people were watching. As she stepped out into the city streets, the change was immediate. People who had recognized her from the videos smiled, nodded, and offered words of encouragement. Some stopped to ask if she was okay, and a few even wanted to share their own stories of facing harassment or discrimination. The girl felt a strange mix of humility and empowerment. She had not sought attention, yet her courage had inspired countless people, showing them that standing up against injustice was possible. Karen, on the other hand, was struggling more than ever. She had hoped that the incident would be forgotten quickly, but the public outrage was relentless. Social media continued to post updates, and the news outlets followed every development. Her friends were distancing themselves, and colleagues were treating her differently. Karen began to feel the weight of public scrutiny and the consequences of her actions. The reality of the situation was sinking in, and there was no way to reverse what had happened. The police had scheduled a formal investigation, and Karen was required to give a statement. The girl, meanwhile, was asked to provide hers again, along with witness statements. The girl prepared carefully, recounting every detail of the encounter. She explained how Karen had approached her aggressively, shouted cruel words, and finally pushed her. The officers listened attentively, taking notes and reviewing videos that had been captured by bystanders. They assured her that the case was being taken seriously and that steps would be taken to ensure justice. Community leaders also became involved. Local organizations focused on disability rights and racial equality reached out to the girl and her family. They praised her courage and asked her to participate in awareness campaigns. The girl was hesitant at first, but after discussions with her family, she realized that sharing her story could help others. She agreed to speak at a few small events, emphasizing the importance of standing up against harassment, promoting empathy, and supporting vulnerable communities. Throughout the day, the city seemed to pulse with attention on the story. Conversations in cafes, offices, and schools were centered on the incident and the lessons it offered. People debated how to create safer spaces, how to respond to harassment, and how to support individuals who face discrimination. The girl's story had sparked more than outrage. It had initiated meaningful discussions about respect, accountability, and human decency. Karen's attempts to regain control of her life were failing. She tried to issue a public apology, but it sounded insincere, and people saw through it. The videos showed the clear sequence of her aggression, leaving little room for doubt. The city, which had once seemed indifferent to her arrogance, was now watching closely. Every move she made was scrutinized, and the consequences of her actions were becoming more apparent. Meanwhile, the girl attended school and went about her daily activities, but she was more aware than ever of the impact she had made. Teachers and classmates approached her with curiosity and admiration. Some asked her how she had remained so calm in such a frightening situation. The girl explained that staying strong was not about ignoring fear, but about choosing to act with dignity despite it. Her words resonated with those around her, and she began to feel a sense of responsibility to continue being a positive influence. Throughout the afternoon, more messages of support arrived. Parents, students, and community members reached out to share how the girl's courage had inspired them to speak up against bullying and discrimination in their own lives. She felt a mixture of pride and humility. The attention was not just about her. It was about the people who had stood by her and the larger movement for justice and equality that was now taking shape. Karen, feeling cornered, tried to meet with lawyers to discuss her options. She realized that the legal consequences would be unavoidable, and that her public image had suffered irreparable damage. The city's response, fueled by public outrage and the spread of video evidence, had made it clear that her actions would not go unpunished. Karen's arrogance and cruelty were now overshadowed by accountability and the collective power of a community standing up for what was right. As the day wore on, the girl participated in a small community gathering organized by local advocacy groups. She shared her experience calmly and thoughtfully, explaining the importance of empathy and speaking up against injustice. People listened attentively, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. The girl felt empowered not just by the support, but by the realization that her story could inspire meaningful change. Her courage had become a catalyst for awareness and education, encouraging people to stand against harassment and discrimination. The city, meanwhile, continued to process the incident. Local authorities began reviewing policies for public behavior, harassment reporting, and safety measures. Schools and community centers discussed programs to promote inclusivity and respect. The girl's story had not only highlighted a problem but also encouraged solutions and proactive efforts. It was a reminder that a single act of bravery could have far-reaching effects. By evening, the intensity of the day began to settle. The girl returned home, feeling exhausted but fulfilled. She reflected on the events, the support she had received, and the impact her courage had made. The fear and humiliation she had felt earlier were still present, but they were now accompanied by a sense of accomplishment and purpose. She had faced cruelty directly and had emerged not only unbroken but stronger and more determined to make a difference. Karen, isolated and facing legal consequences, was left to confront the reality of her actions. The public, the city, and the legal system were watching, and there was no escaping accountability. The girl's courage, combined with the community's support and vigilance, had created a powerful force that could not be ignored. It was a turning point for both the girl and the city, emphasizing the importance of standing up for what is right. That night, as the girl prepared for bed, she felt a quiet sense of pride. She had endured a terrifying and humiliating moment, and yet she had inspired countless people. Her experience had become a story of resilience, justice, and the power of standing up against cruelty. The city had witnessed more than an act of aggression. It had witnessed courage, unity, and the beginning of a movement for empathy and respect. The girl knew that her journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that she was not alone and that her strength could inspire others to do the same. The next morning, The city was alive with talk of the incident. Social media continued to buzz, and news outlets were providing updates on Karen's situation. The girl, despite the lingering nerves from the confrontation, prepared herself for another day of interviews, school, and community engagement. Her family encouraged her to stay focused and calm, reminding her that her courage had made a difference and that she had the right to take each step at her own pace. The girl made her way to school, noticing the change in how people treated her. Teachers greeted her warmly, students approached with curiosity and admiration, and strangers on the street recognized her from the videos. She felt a mixture of pride and humility, understanding that the attention was not only about her but also about what she had stood for. The incident had sparked conversations about empathy, kindness, and the need to protect vulnerable members of the community. Meanwhile, Karen was facing increasing pressure. Lawyers were advising her on the potential legal consequences, and she was struggling to maintain her composure under the public scrutiny. Her attempts at damage control were failing as videos and witness statements left little room for doubt. The reality of the situation was settling in. She could no longer act as if the incident hadn't happened. The city and the people within it were demanding accountability, and she would have to answer for her actions. At school, the girl was asked to speak with a few student groups about the incident and how she had handled it. She explained calmly that staying strong didn't mean ignoring fear or pain but making the choice to act with dignity. Her words resonated with those listening, many of whom had faced bullying or discrimination themselves. They saw in her a role model, someone who could show that courage and composure could make a real difference. As the day progressed, community leaders and advocacy organizations reached out to the girl and her family. They wanted to highlight her story as an example of resilience and as a teaching moment for the city. The girl agreed to participate in a small panel discussion about harassment, respect, and public behavior. She prepared thoughtfully, determined to share her message without exaggeration, keeping it honest and human. She wanted people to understand the emotional impact of cruelty and the power of standing up for oneself. Meanwhile, Karen's attempts to maintain her daily life became more difficult. People avoided her. Conversations about her behavior followed her everywhere, and her social media accounts were flooded with messages condemning her actions. Even in her workplace, colleagues were aware of what had happened, and whispers of disapproval followed her. The city's reaction had made it clear that cruelty and aggression would not go unnoticed or unpunished. The girl attended the panel discussion with a few supportive friends and family members. She shared her experience in detail, describing the fear and humiliation she had felt, but also the courage it took to stand her ground. People listened intently, asking questions about how they could support victims of harassment and how to create safer communities. The girl realized that her story was helping others feel empowered, showing them that standing up against cruelty was possible even in public spaces. After the discussion, several community members approached the girl, thanking her for speaking out. Some shared personal stories of bullying and discrimination, expressing gratitude for the girl's bravery. Others asked how they could help spread awareness and prevent similar incidents. The girl felt a sense of connection and purpose, understanding that her experience could create a ripple effect of empathy and action. Karen's situation continued to deteriorate. The police had compiled enough evidence, including video footage and witness statements, to press charges against her. Her social reputation was severely damaged, and she was forced to confront the consequences of her public aggression. The girl's courage, combined with the support of the community and the evidence collected, ensured that justice would be served. The city had witnessed the power of accountability and the importance of standing up against cruelty. As the day ended, the girl reflected on the events and the attention her story had brought. She had faced fear and humiliation, but she had also inspired thousands of people to stand against harassment and discrimination. She realized that her courage had created awareness and encouraged others to act with empathy and respect. The incident had sparked a movement within the city, showing that one person's bravery could make a difference. That evening, the girl returned home, exhausted but proud. She spent time with her family, sharing moments of reflection and discussion about the events. They praised her bravery and reminded her that she had acted with dignity and strength. The girl felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had turned a painful experience into an opportunity to educate and inspire others. Karen, isolated and facing legal consequences, began to understand the seriousness of her actions. The city's attention and the public outrage had made it clear that she could not escape responsibility. Her attempts to minimize the incident had failed, and she was left to confront the reality of her behavior. The girl's courage and the community's support had created a powerful force that ensured accountability and justice. The girl continued her daily life, attending school and participating in community events. She felt more confident and empowered, knowing that she had faced a public challenge and emerged stronger. The experience had shown her that standing up for oneself, even in the face of fear and cruelty, could inspire change and create a more compassionate community. By the end of the day, the city had embraced the girl's story as a symbol of resilience and courage. Discussions about harassment, empathy, and inclusivity continued in schools, workplaces, and homes. The incident had sparked a citywide conversation about respect and accountability, and the girl's bravery was at the heart of it. She had not only survived a difficult moment but had transformed it into a lesson for the entire community. That night, as she prepared for bed, the girl felt a quiet sense of pride and fulfillment. She had faced danger and humiliation with strength and dignity, inspiring countless people in the process. The city had witnessed courage, accountability, and the power of standing up for what is right. The girl knew that her journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face the future with confidence, knowing that her actions had made a difference and that she could continue to inspire others to stand against cruelty and injustice. The following morning, the city was alive with a sense of change. The girl, now recognized by many for her courage, walked the streets with a quiet confidence. Her story had spread far and wide, inspiring people from all walks of life. Teachers, students, families, and community leaders had reached out to express admiration and gratitude for the strength she had shown. Each nod of acknowledgement, each smile, reminded her that standing up for herself had made a real difference. Her family continued to support her, encouraging her to balance her public attention with personal well-being. They reminded her that while she had become a symbol of bravery, it was important to take care of herself and not be overwhelmed by the expectations of others. The girl understood this and embraced the calm moments with her family, sharing laughter and quiet conversations that grounded her amidst the intensity of public recognition. Karen, on the other hand, was facing the consequences of her actions more intensely than ever. The legal system had prepared a strong case against her, bolstered by video evidence, witness statements, and public support for the girl. Her attempts to mitigate the situation had failed, and she found herself isolated socially and professionally. The city's scrutiny and the public's outrage made it clear that cruelty and aggression were not acceptable, and Karen would have to face accountability for her behavior. The girl's day was filled with community engagements and meetings with advocacy groups. She shared her story, highlighting the importance of empathy, kindness, and standing up against harassment and discrimination. People listened attentively, asking questions about how to create safer environments and how to support individuals who face prejudice. Her calm, honest, and thoughtful words resonated deeply, inspiring actions and discussions that went beyond the initial incident. At school, teachers incorporated lessons inspired by the incident, emphasizing respect, inclusivity, and the impact of words and actions on others. Students were encouraged to share their own experiences and reflect on how they could contribute to a positive and supportive environment. The girl participated in some of these discussions, offering insight and guidance, helping others understand the importance of standing up and supporting those who are vulnerable. As the day progressed, news outlets reported that Karen had been officially charged with assault and public harassment. The coverage highlighted the bravery of the girl and the power of community support in ensuring justice. Interviews with witnesses and advocacy groups emphasized the need for awareness, education, and proactive measures to prevent harassment. The city's response became a model for accountability, showing how collective action and courage could influence change. Throughout the city, people continued to talk about the incident and the lessons it offered. Community organizations hosted workshops and events focused on empathy, anti-bullying strategies, and inclusivity. Schools and local authorities reviewed policies to create safer public spaces and to ensure that acts of aggression were addressed promptly and fairly. The girl's experience had sparked a movement, encouraging people to reflect on their actions and to stand up for justice and compassion. The girl, despite her growing recognition, remained humble. She continued to engage with people in a sincere and thoughtful way, emphasizing the importance of understanding and kindness. She encouraged others to speak out against harassment and to support one another, demonstrating that courage was not just about confronting danger, but also about fostering positive change in the community. Karen's attempts to rebuild her life were overshadowed by the incident. Her reputation had suffered irreparable damage, and the public was closely watching her legal proceedings. Friends and colleagues had distanced themselves, and the social consequences of her actions were evident. The city had made it clear that cruelty would not be tolerated, and Karen was facing the results of her behavior both legally and socially. The girl participated in a city council meeting, where officials discussed measures to improve public safety and inclusivity. She spoke about her experience, emphasizing the importance of community support and the need for policies that protect vulnerable individuals. Her words were met with applause and agreement, inspiring local leaders to implement new initiatives. The girl realized that her courage had not only impacted individuals but had influenced decisions at a citywide level, creating lasting change. In the days following, the girl continued to receive messages of support and admiration. Parents, teachers, students, and community members expressed gratitude for her bravery and for inspiring discussions about respect and empathy. The attention she received was not just for surviving an act of aggression but for using her experience to educate and motivate others. She felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that her actions were making a meaningful difference. Karen's legal proceedings moved forward, and she was required to attend court sessions. Witnesses, including bystanders and the girl herself, provided statements detailing the incident. The overwhelming evidence, combined with the city's support for the girl, ensured that justice was being pursued effectively. Karen's public image remained tarnished, and she faced accountability for her actions in a way that reinforced the city's commitment to safety and respect. The girl's family continued to be her anchor, providing encouragement, love, and guidance. They celebrated her achievements and reminded her that her strength and courage had inspired countless people. The girl felt proud, not for herself alone, but for the message she had conveyed. That standing up against cruelty, even in small moments, could have a profound impact on a community. As the city moved forward, people reflected on the incident and the lessons it offered. Discussions about empathy, kindness, and accountability became more prominent in schools, workplaces, and public forums. The girl's story served as a reminder that individuals could make a difference, that courage and compassion could inspire change, and that standing up against injustice was both necessary and powerful. The girl, now more confident and aware of her influence, continued her daily routine while remaining engaged in community efforts. She participated in workshops, spoke at events, and shared her insights with others. Her actions demonstrated that resilience was not just about overcoming fear, but about using experiences to educate and empower others. The city had witnessed courage, accountability, and the power of community support, all centered around her bravery. By the evening, the girl reflected on the journey she had been through. From the moment of fear and humiliation on the city street to becoming a symbol of courage and resilience, she had grown in ways she never expected. The support of strangers, the encouragement of her family, and the recognition of the community had all contributed to her strength. She realized that her experience, though painful, had become a source of hope and inspiration for many. Karen's situation, now firmly in the hands of the legal system, underscored the consequences of public aggression and prejudice. The city's response, the support for the girl, and the accountability imposed on Karen highlighted the importance of standing up against cruelty and fostering a culture of respect. The girl's bravery had not only protected herself but had also encouraged systemic change, reinforcing the values of empathy and justice. As the girl prepared for bed that night, she felt a sense of fulfillment and pride. She had faced fear, stood her ground, and inspired her community. Her journey had been challenging, but it had also shown the strength of human resilience and the power of standing up for what is right. The city had witnessed not only an act of courage but also the potential for lasting positive change. The girl knew that while her story had begun with a moment of cruelty, it would continue to influence others, serving as a reminder that bravery, empathy, and community support could triumph over hate and injustice. The city, now more aware and compassionate because of her experience, had embraced the lessons learned. Schools, families, and community organizations had taken steps to ensure that individuals would be treated with respect and dignity. The girl's courage had sparked a movement, reminding everyone that standing up against cruelty was not just a personal act, but a responsibility that could inspire collective change. Her story ended not with fear or defeat, but with hope, resilience, and the promise of a more empathetic city for the future.